everyone. Nice to be here. I'm here to talk about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the circular economy more broadly. I can see there's been some very carefully planned agendering today, because normally when it comes to explaining what we do at the foundation, it's very difficult. I still don't think that my mother really knows what I do at work. I've explained it over and over again. But to use the two previous speakers, I think if you think, the initial speaker of Dr. Carter saying from the macro view and looking at global cities and the kind of more long-term view, and then more recently with Thomas at the kind of micro maker movement scale, what we try to do is convene and bring people together between all of those levels. So we're looking at engaging big businesses, higher education, universities, but we also try and engage with SMEs and startups, and we're trying to slowly tap into the maker movement, which is great to be here. And I was actually at Machine Rooms just 6 weeks ago having a conversation about how we can do more of that. So the circular economy, I just get a show of hands in the room if you've heard of the circular economy? That's good. Okay, my brief was that generally people will know what the circular economy is, but there might be a bit of a conception that it's a buzzword. And so, I'm here to try and dispel a bit of that and also, provide our angle on what it is. So it's really difficult to talk about and define the circular economy. So it's difficult to talk about the circular economy without talking about the existing economy. So it's quite hard to initially start straight away and define what the circular economy is. We find it's easier to say, well, what's the situation today? What's happening today? The reality is of today that we operate in a linear system. So that means we take resources from the ground, we make and manufacture stuff, we use it, and then essentially we dispose it, we landfill it. And this economy has got us to where we are today. It's had some amazing achievements. All the technology and innovation that's in this room is a result of an industrial economy that has grown and got us to this place. But what we're seeing is that this economy is kind of reaching its limits, and there are some big trends on the horizon that actually have a bit of a cause for concern. I'm going to dig into a couple of those with you. First of all, this kind of idea of a structural loss. So this idea that the way the economy is structured means that we are kind of losing value inherently in the system. Let me give you a couple of tangible examples. So 98% of the energy that we use, your light bulbs use, only 2% of the energy that your light bulbs use actually goes into producing light. So there's 98% of that energy that's just not applied to what it's actually meant to do. 30% of all landfill waste in Europe is generated by the construction and demolition of the built environment. So there's 30% of all of the stuff we put in landfill. And your average European car is parked 90% of the time. So, if you just think about those from a macro perspective, there's just incredible waste of resources and assets that are sitting idle. The second point, and I'll run through these because you're probably well familiar with price volatility. So the oil price spiking, dipping, it's very low at the moment, which is a challenge when we talk about finding substitute materials or technologies, because people are saying, well, plastic's so cheap, so why should we look in this avenue? But the upside is that businesses want stability, they don't want volatility, and I think there's some opportunity in that. The demographic pressure, the rise of the middle class, this big number, 3 billion new middle class consumers, all going to want new products and services, changing of diets, going to be more meat heavy. Our agricultural systems and the degradation of soil means that that's going to be a real challenge for us to deliver to those new wants and needs. Urbanization. 75% of the global population will live in cities by 2050. And I heard a really interesting take on that yesterday, which was that after that it's going to plateau. and after that, population growth is going to plateau. So we've essentially got one generation to build the infrastructure for the cities that is going to last for the next 100, 150 years. And we need to be incorporating some of this innovation and this innovative thinking today so that we're set up for that. I'm sorry, my slides that are coming up on here are slightly different to the ones on there. Is that? I'm not sure. I'm talking about something, you guys are seeing something else, but it's just the ones that are on here are very different. But anyway, I'll keep riffing. I'll riff to the ones that you can't see. Ignore the slides. So what we're talking about, the other big trend that we're seeing is technology, which is why you're all here today. And we're seeing an evolution in hardware technology, but also software technology. So 3D printing, driverless cars. I read this morning that the first solar-powered plane landed in Sevilla today, and that's part of a kind of round-the-world trip from Abu Dhabi back to Abu Dhabi. So that's quite an interesting one. It just shows you what's possible, not tomorrow, but maybe in the future. Software, blockchain. Blockchain technology is totally disrupting the finance industry, and that's essentially just an entry point for that technology. We expect to see that move into supply chain. I don't know if anyone's familiar with a company called Provenance. They're already applying that technology to build transparency into supply chain so you can track what inputs are coming in at each stage and from where. And if you think about what you can do when you aggregate that information on a global scale, it becomes very useful, very disruptive, very powerful. So based on those trends, we feel that there's opportunity and it's prime for a new economic model, the circular economy. And we really do approach this from a systems view, a systems perspective. So how can we, let me just kind of say, one of the things that I personally feel about the concept of the circular economy is that it's a very elegant and beautiful concept. It's nice, it fits together, there aren't very many rough edges. And the principle behind that is that the components of that economy are designed with the whole system in mind. So rather than taking one product or one supply chain and thinking about what happens if you see that through, it's really thinking about how does that connect into this global web or, of other supply chains, other products. The principles of a circular economy is restorative by design. And I've bolded a couple of words here, but yeah, it's that restorative word. It's the fact that we want to decouple growth from finite resources. And it's the fact that we want to keep materials and assets at their highest utility for the longest period. As Thomas led in, systems and systems effectiveness are two big words for us. And when we talk about system, we really are talking about taking a holistic view. And I think one of the challenges with sustainability in the past is that it has been focused on efficiency gains and making incremental improvements to an existing system. And that's an idea of doing less bad. And what we like to talk about and advocate for is just doing more good. And I think this idea of designing a system that is effective overall and globally is aligned with that. So this is our kind of butterfly diagram. This is something that we try and put out at any opportunity possible. And I'm not going to dig into it too deeply, but there are kind of broadly three main areas to this. At the very top, you see you've got renewables and finite materials. This is the inflow into the economy, and this is that principle of decoupling. And what we're saying is that we need to transition and find renewably sourced materials, renewably sourced energy to power this economy. Then when you come into the middle chunk, we separate the butterfly between two wings. One wing on the right-hand side is talking about the technical side of the butterfly, which is kind of products and materials that really flow in loops, and loops is a big kind of word here. One of the criticisms that we hear is that circular economy is just recycling 2.0, and you know, that for us is not true at all. Actually, if you look here, recycling is the kind of last resort in the circular economy, and we really want to focus on the inner loops before you get there. On the left-hand side, it's the biological cycle, and that's about keeping nutrients and making sure nutrients are flowing through the system effectively and getting back to the right place, and restoring that natural capital that we really depend on for our food systems, our fish stocks, you know, our soil quality. And then at the bottom here, we've got this kind of small font saying minimize system leakage. The idea is that you're never going to design a perfect system, you know. You might sit on paper and draw a butterfly diagram and think that's great, but the reality is there'll always be things that kind of escape the processes you put in place. Ocean plastics are a great example of that today. And I heard another statistic yesterday that for every foot of coastline in the world, every year, 3 carrier bags of plastic go into the ocean. So if you just kind of put that in perspective, it's a lot of plastic. And there will, you know, things like that will happen in a circular economy. But what we're saying is you need to design the products and the materials that go into these products so that when that does happen, they don't have such a negative effect on the natural capital. There's a couple of other things to mention here as well, that there's an ecosystem around this butterfly diagram, which is logistics, finance. How do these enabling industries play a role in a circular economy? And that's something we're seeing a great deal of talk about and thinking about at the moment. Another little bit of theory, the last bit I promise, we'll jump into some examples in a sec. We talk about the 4 areas of value creation in the circular economy. So this is really how businesses can capitalize on this opportunity and generate value. The power of the inner circle is about maintaining assets at their highest utility for as long as possible. And at the heart of that is quite an interesting concept around ownership. So we work with a startup out of Amsterdam, they're called Bundles, and they, instead of selling washing machines, they sell the ability to wash your clothes. So they sell a washing machine as a service, and you pay per wash. So for Bundles, their business model is directly aligned with trying to keep that washing machine at its highest utility for as long as possible. And that's kind of what we're talking about that power of the inner circle, of really getting the most out of your assets when they're there. The power of circling longer, it's about closing loops, getting materials back, not letting them cascade to those outer cycles too quickly, reuse them, remanufacture them. Cascaded use really applies to the biocycle. I think ecovative packaging is a really good example of this. For those that don't know, it's a mushroom-based, organic-based alternative to polystyrene. They're selling to some big customers like Dell. Dell package all of their B2B servers in ecovative mushroom packaging. That comes from a byproduct from the agricultural process. They put it in these blocks and add fungi, which grows around it to create these kind of bulk, comfy cushions. And then at the end of life, after it's been used, that can be chucked in the compost and it will biodegrade and you'll get good compost off the back of it. So it's about cascading. And finally, just this bottom one here is, again, talking about those negative elements. H&M have implemented a take-back scheme for their textiles. So their idea is to get lots of textiles back so that they can start re-looping them into their manufacturing process. And what they're finding is that they are getting this back, but what is in the textiles is preventing them from really doing anything kind of productive with them other than downcycling. So they can turn them into cloths and rags that you could use in your kitchen and clean stuff up, but there's a limit to kind of quality there around feeding that back in so they can make you another nice cashmere jumper or something. And there's a purity question there. So just a quick run through of a case study of who's doing what that's hopefully fairly relevant for everyone in the room. I love Fairphone. I think it's a great concept. Obviously, they're doing a lot around their supply chain and the impact. But this idea of modular design for repairability and being able to sell that, at scale. I mean, it is still a niche product. It's not competing with the iPhone anytime soon, but it shows that there is demand and there is a kind of user interest. Ifixit publishing all of their open source repair manuals online, and that is really to enable users in the home to repair their own equipment. So that's a great example of building a bit of a movement around a normal person being able to kind of maintain and kind of upgrade their own hardware. Ifixit did a really interesting project with Patagonia, where Patagonia had designed a suitcase. And it was a really well-designed suitcase, but there was a retractable handle on the top. And that retractable handle had a limit of 5,000 uses, and they knew they just couldn't get around that. So what they had the warranty, and people would post the whole suitcase back to Patagonia. Patagonia would fix the handle and post it back. And they worked with Ifixit to say, this is kind of crazy because we're just posting air. You know, we are literally posting an empty suitcase from here to here, and the kind of CO2 and environmental and cost implications of that are wild. Why are we doing that? Ifixit published a repair manual. Patagonia tweaked to the design, so there are 2 screws in the handle that were then now painted red, so that a user could identify the screws, unscrew them very quickly, detach the handle from the case, post the handle, get the handle back, reattach, and then their case would be fine. So I think that's a great example of just how a little tweak, a little design tweak, can have quite a big impact on the system if you think about the logistics of moving that all around. And finally, HP. HP are a member of our C100 program that I manage as our Ifixit. And they have just put out a modular design tablet that got 10 out of 10 on the Ifixit website for repairability. So that's kind of unheard of, and it's an indication of what big businesses are doing around this, and they are taking it seriously. Sorry. So, is it a buzzword? Is it a buzzword? I don't know. It's not to me. You know, it might be to you. I think the way I like to see it and the way I like to look at it is that circular economy is really, it's an umbrella. And it's one framework that kind of overarches so many other ideas and thinking initiatives that are ongoing. Here are some of the schools of thought that we really lean on heavily. The cradle-to-cradle design guidelines written back in the 70s, the biomimicry work, Biomimicry Institute are part of our network. The performance economy, the sharing economy, natural capitalism, and industrial ecology. These are all ideas that have their own kind of trajectories and own histories, but for us, they do feed into this overall picture of what a circular economy is. So we're not trying to say this has got all the answers, but I think it does offer a very neat framework that you can apply to different problems. I think this was just a slide to show the network and the number of organizations we work with, and there's a real, in a true systems thinking way, there's a real complexity to that, which we're grappling with. And that's a reality, that if you want to connect at the very highest level of business and at the World Economic Forum, all the way down to the disruptive ideas and innovations that are really going to be shaping the economy going forward, you have to spread yourself and have a broad breadth. But we really also try to have depth with the different networks that we work with through education, through governments and cities. Catalonia is a member of our network. Also, through the affiliate program down here, I mentioned Biomimicry Institute, but the Cradle to Cradle Institute, the McDonough Innovation Institute, they're all part of the picture because they provide skill sets and thinking that is niche and is their own. So this is the final slide. This is an idea that I just want to leave you with, is that we don't have all the answers, and we're not trying to pretend that we do. We compare where we are to a 16th century map of the globe, where there is some stuff that is known, and people have traveled there and we've figured it out and we think that's real, but there's a lot that isn't. And I think we're on this kind of journey of discovery. For us, it's very clear what the point on the horizon is, where we're going, and it's that idea, it's that elegant idea that is kind of the glue that pulls all this together. But how we get there is, is up for debate. I think we can say we know maybe 10% of what is actually going to unfold over the next couple of decades. And that's why it's great to be here, connecting with you guys and seeing what's happening in Barcelona in this specific, around 3D printing and how that can shape the future of manufacturing. I don't know. I mean, could it do for manufacturing what solar panels have done for energy and really cause this kind of distributed network of production, which would have huge ramifications for logistics and create kind of resilient communities and this kind of people having a much closer relationship with materials and knowing local material loops. I don't know, but it's a really exciting place to play in, and I look forward to kind of chatting with any of you afterwards about it. Cheers. Thank you.